As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. All right, we're getting to, I think, what Chris wanted to talk about, and that is the TimtheTatman and Chipotle activation. And the idea was from Chipotle was they launched the quesadilla. They wanted to leverage TimtheTatman, 100 Thieves, Booga, and some other content creators to cast sort of this wide net in gaming and introduce this quesadilla lunch. And you could order a TimtheTatman brisket burrito. And there's this interesting data point they had here, which is if you have ordered one or more food delivery services in the past 3 months. So they looked at everyone who used one or more food delivery services in the past 3 months, because all of the Chipotle stuff was around, ordering it. And the conclusion here was, if you are a game streaming viewer, 72% have used a food delivery service in the last 3 months versus only 51%, which is the national average. And so, again, in terms of the target-rich environment for a company like Chipotle, when you have data like this, you're far more likely to spend on content creators on Twitch or YouTube or wherever who are streaming, because they're much more likely. This is a very significant difference. Much more likely to be ordering from food delivery services. Chris says, so my leading question is, how much is a 3% bump in awareness on that graph worth when hiring those influencers? Impact on Twitch versus impact on general 18 to 34 audience. Curious what you guys think about that. And hang on, let me bring that slide back up, Chris. The one where it was showing. I assume you were referring to the snacks and beverage slide. Which
was it that graph he was just talking about? Where if you pull that back up, I think the 3% might be wrong on the math. It was 72 versus 67. Is that what you're talking about? That difference?
Yeah,
I think you're talking about that graph we were just looking at.
Graph.
Okay, Chris is saying I'm wrong. Turns out Chris knows how to do math.
So I think this is the graph Chris is referring to, which is Chipotle's current customers. Okay, and here YouGov looked at what percentage of their current customers are US 18 to 34-year-olds versus game stream viewers. And Chris, tell me if this is the one that you had in mind here. But the percent that purchased in the past 30 days, is this the one you were referring to? Because here you see, percentage of 18 to 34-year-olds who buy Chipotle in the last 30 days, pretty stable overall. What you notice is, as soon as they started this streamer campaign, obviously the game stream viewer purchases pick up, and it sort of carries the total, the 18 to 34 total upwards, right? Like, you see how that 18 to 34 line goes from, this is what, roughly 14 to call this, 16 or 17 here at its peak. Is that the 3% you're referring to, Chris? Yeah. Okay. So here's his leading question. I assume you're saying it's leading, Chris, because you don't think it's significant, but the 3% bump there, how do you guys feel about, first of all, the beauty of the YouGov data is you can see differences that are that small, you want to call them, or that, that detailed, that specific. The question is, what conclusion do we draw from this? Lindsay, do you have thoughts on this? Or Jeff, sorry, go ahead.
Well, obviously, without having all the sales data and knowing what they're spending versus anything else, it's hard to put a number on it and say, kind of answer your leading question. But if we start with the premise of they're going to need to spend advertising dollars somewhere, right? Chipotle spends marketing dollars all the time. It sort of makes sense to target this audience, and the fact that they got a 3% bump in awareness amongst an audience that is in their target demographic and very likely to be interested in buying Chipotle. To me, that's a pretty effective marketing campaign, without knowing kind of where they're spending their other dollars and kind of comparative kind of CPMs and costs and all that kind of good stuff that goes into kind of ad tech and marketing. It's hard to like give an exact answer, but I don't think you should look at 3% bump and say like, oh well, that's only 3%. It's not that much, so the campaign wasn't that effective. A lot of times with marketing, you're pulling tiny little levers, and small changes can really impact dollars, a ton.
Yeah, I mean, you also want to compare what that 3% means to Chipotle and how much, it would cost to, to get all these guys for that activation. I like comparing personally, Chris, when you look at the Under Armour drops that The Rock comes out with almost every quarter, and kind of seeing what The Rock is able to do for Under Armour stock when his brand, which always gets sold out as well, affects their stock. And then contrasting that not just with this, but also with something like when Ronaldo removed the Coca-Cola, from that platform, and Coca-Cola stock dropped by like 1.62 something percent. And again, slightly different because that one of them is a product line. This is a an activation or a campaign for a food, and then the other is like an individual action. But back to Jeff's point, tying in these celebrities or influencers and their ability to affect or to drive traffic to that brand. In my experience in using influencers for campaigns like this, it's always interesting and difficult, because what you see, and what I thought that the last YouGov graph showed really well, was definitely a spike in engagement, but the harder part is retention, right? It's never whether or not they can move the needle or whether they can drive people to a product. It's whether those people stay when the activation's over. So those are the things that, I'm not sure the nature of the meeting that you have, but hopefully those four anecdotes or three anecdotes, as well as that one about the engagement, that concept, are some interesting things to think about on how that's applied to your situation.
Well, and to be fair, I had to Google, but the number of 18 to 34-year-olds in the US is 76 million. So 3% of that is a huge
Yeah,
amount of sales
it's
for
true.
Chipotle. Yeah. So I, to me, like it's so hard. I mean, any marketing spend, it's nearly impossible to measure the outcome, right? Like this graph is probably the most granular look you're going to get. And even then, it's still hard to know if that 3% jump is all from streaming or if something else happened or whatever it is that caused that slight bump. But at the end of the day, it still resulted in 2 to 2.5 million more sales in that age demographic. So I think like this is the best look you're going to get. It's always impossible to tell exactly the impact that marketing dollars have. And like Jimmy said, it's always impossible to tell exactly what your retention rate's going to be. However, it did have some impact that, considering audience size, is extremely significant. I would be a lot more wary of this if it jumped up by 20 or 30%, because that would be ridiculous. 3% actually seems to be not only logical and reasonable, but it seems to be kind of a good marker for how much the influencer market can kind of push people into actually buying things. That seems to be an extremely, I don't know, real world solution there, or real world jump that I could see happening as a result of this campaign.
Yeah, Lindsay, it's such a good point on just the total size of the market, right? Like when you're also Chipotle size, 3% increase and this is
Huge.
not 3% increase in sales. This is 3% increase in your customer base, right? So your
Mhm.
sales may, you know, depending how much each customer spends, right? You could be talking about a pretty significant amount of sales and revenue increase. And so, like, I don't think we should just say 3% is insignificant and toss it out. When I looked at this graph, I think for me, what stood out, the conversation shouldn't be about the 3% here. The conversation should be about this purple line, right? And proof of what I would call, for lack of a better word here, product market fit, right? Where you have a product and you put it out to this gamer sort of audience, and you go from 3 or 2.5 or 2.5% to our customers here to like a high of over 20% in a span of a few months, right? What this screams to me is they have found the perfect audience for their product, right? Because if the gaming audience, if the Chipotle burrito, whatever, quesadilla was not the right product for that audience, or this audience was not the right audience for this product, this purple line would have stayed flat, right? And we wouldn't even be talking about the 3%. The fact that there's such a huge jump in that purple line, to me, says this is an audience that embraces that product, loves that product, enjoyed that product, resonated with it.
That's actually such a good point, Paul. Like we were all, I think I personally was so focused on like the one area where they put it out and then it went down. I would love to see this chart zoomed out, because clearly I think the way to interpret this, if you look at it over time, it's like, sorry, can you pull that back up?
Oh, yeah,
it's
sorry.
like, US, basically gamers were way less likely than the average 18 to 25 or 18 to 34-year-old to be Chipotle customers. But then now after the campaign, they're keeping a large number. Like, yes, it did drop, but they are keeping a significant number of new customers. And if you're thinking about that as a brand, like what is the lifetime value of those new customers? It's not just that one-time 3% bump. It's, hey, we brought in literally potentially another 7 to 10% of the population that are now customers over time and are going to keep coming back. Like that could be worth literally hundreds of millions, if not billions, to a company like Chipotle.
Yeah, it's a great point. And like I said, it's proof that this, like the gaming market, was the right market for Chipotle to go after. Because if this purple line was flat, then you could conclude, hey, this is the wrong target market for our product, right? So we either have to try a new audience or change the product up, right? Like you have to make one decision or the other. But this to me was the product and the audience fit here just right to see this, 4x increase in customers. Like that's not an insignificant amount.